Here's the fact. We're all sick. People in their 20s, 30s, and 40s are harboring metabolic dysfunction. One of the greatest lies in healthcare is that people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s are healthy. Look around us. We've got anxiety. We've got sluggishness. We've got brain fog. We've got problems with sleep.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider podcast. I'm your host, Joe Veneri. Today I'm joined by Calley Means, co-founder of TruMed. In this episode, we discuss the company's plan for using HSAs and FSAs to incentivize healthy habits. Calley explains how big food and big pharma influences have compromised our healthcare system. Plus, we talk about a top-down and bottoms-up approach to affecting change. Let's get into it. The Fitt Insider podcast is brought to you by Jack Taylor, our exclusive PR partner. More than just PR, they're creative storytellers and brand builders who actually understand the health and wellness industry. Learn more and get in touch at jacktaylorpr.com. Hi, Calley. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, great to be here, Joe.
Yeah, looking forward to chatting today. Certainly a lot to get into, both in terms of your background, what you're working on at TruMed, and also just kind of the broader state of health and food in the U.S. But maybe to kick things off, can you just tell us both about your background and TruMed?
Absolutely. Well, I started my career thinking I was going to be in politics, very passionate about public policy. And as I've been talking about in some other podcasts, worked for food companies, for pharma companies doing consulting around political issues, and immediately disabused of that notion. So got more into entrepreneurship, started some e-commerce companies, some companies in other fields. But a couple big factors have convinced me that this issue of our rigged food system, and the fact that it's really just a simple premise. It's something you talk about. It's something I know a lot of our listeners implicitly know, but it's like most people don't quite get it. 80% of deaths in the United States, and more than that, probably 85% of costs, are driven by preventable metabolic conditions tied to food and other metabolic habits, like simple things our mom talked about, like sleep and movement. And there's a way to incentivize that. There's a way to incentivize those habits. And, where this personally came through to me is a couple factors. My sister was the pride of the family, Stanford Med School, just basically came after me in college, but did everything better, was the president of her class and top of her class at Stanford Med School, and a surgeon. And she was doing surgery in her 6th year of residency, cutting open someone's sinus. She had a neck surgeon, and she had an out-of-body experience where she didn't know why that person was sick. And she realized that when you trace the incentive of Stanford Med School, a lot of their funding, she thought over 50% of it somehow touched pharma. And she didn't take one nutrition class. And doctors who go into even diabetes management don't even understand why people are getting diabetes, why people are sick. And what she realized is that inflammation, these patients that kept coming back, that she was literally cutting into them to cure, they were just coming with that inflammation, and nobody actually knew how that was happening. And she left the system. She started Levels Health, which has had a huge impact on me, both how they're building the company and the product to help people with metabolic health, and really learning from her, Dr. Calley Means. And then around COVID, it wasn't related to this, but my mom got very sick. She was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and she died 12 days after the diagnosis, our best friend. And taking what I've learned from Calley about metabolic health being the root of disease, and then, unspooling pancreatic cancer, which doctors at Stanford Hospital were telling us was unlucky. It's not unlucky. Cancers and dementia and a lot of these conditions we think are random and doctors tell us are unlucky. These are tied to metabolic health. These are tied to what we're eating, to what we're doing. So that's kind of the mission for me. And I set on this path of a simple question: how do we incentivize healthy behaviors? And just started talking about that, meeting people, through Calley. Met a person, Justin Mares, who has been a warrior in this fight, used to work in tech, but started Kettle and Fire, Bone Broth, and Perfect Keto, and had recently passed those off. And we just talked for months about just the incentives, the incentive of healthcare for everyone to be sick. That's what we're up against. Every institution makes money when people are sick. So TruMed started with that question of how do we incentivize healthy behaviors? And what we're excited about, what we found, is that most Americans have access to these HSA, FSA accounts, these tax-free accounts. And usually that goes to drugs. There's $140 billion sitting in these accounts. And we've heard about these, right? It's waiting till you get sick to get some drugs. And what we realized, learning from Mark Hyman and a lot of the other food is medicine, metabolic folks, is that food isn't just preventative. Food is actually often the best medicine when you have something. It can reverse Alzheimer's. It can, reverse heart disease, reverse diabetes is reversible. Doctors don't say that, but it is through food. And we found that if you can write food prescriptions, which some forward-thinking doctors are, or prescriptions for exercise to reverse or prevent a condition, that counts as medicine, and it's the best medicine. And it actually allows you to buy food or exercise tax-free. So our goal at TrueMed is to make that as seamless as possible, and we're very excited about it. We're going to be launching soon.
Yeah, there's so much there. I think, well, first and foremost, know your sister, know the levels team. And it's awesome to see kind of both of you going down this path of like, how do we solve such a huge problem for our country, for society in general? And then also, sorry to hear about your mom. And I know how tough that is. I lost my father to brain cancer when I was in my early 20s. And while it's not kind of as direct a line, set me off on this path even more than I already had been of like, how do I help people live a healthier lifestyle, right? How do we do that in every way possible? And Fitt Insider in some ways has grown from that, which is why I want to empower other operators who are in the health and fitness space. So we hopefully impact many, many more consumers down the road. So it resonates with me. And I think it's that type of passion and commitment that's really going to bring about change. And in this case, you can't have that type of change unless you change the incentives. And that's something that's so fundamentally broken in the broader system, is that everybody is rewarded, essentially, all the parties, the stakeholders, when we're sick, when we're going to the doctor and need prescriptions and need interventions and need treatment. And in this case with TrueMed, thinking about like, how do we change that from the onset? You mentioned kind of thinking through the different mechanisms, and maybe how do we go about this in a way that reframes those incentives. The HSA, FSA is certainly something that, frankly, I think a lot of people don't even know about in the first place, right? They don't even know what they are. They don't know how to use them. And then using them just seems like another chore that they have to do and figuring it out. So maybe what was the insight beyond that? How does it work that you're enabling people to do this? And yeah, what's the status at this point?
Well, Justin and I bonded over a simple premise, which is that Americans aren't systematically trying to kill themselves. I think there's a lot of cynicism in the medical system where, Casey, when she had the gall to recommend a dietary intervention, was told by her attending surgeon to not, quote, not be a pussy, and that she didn't go to dietitian school and to perform the surgery. And I think there's this nihilism really about a view of human nature that 80% of American adults who are now overweight or obese are trying to do that. That 15% of kids are getting fatty liver disease because they're lazy, which is actually what a Harvard obesity doctor suggested to me on a recent Bari Weiss episode of whether we should be giving mass prescribing Ozempic to children, an obesity drug. There's this embedded, literally even children being sick and obese, that it's kind of their fault, they're lazy. No, the incentives are stacked against folks. Incentives explain everything. And there's $4 trillion spent on healthcare, $6 trillion spent on food. And I call it the devil's bargain. I think it's very understandable, really. The food companies want food to be addictive and they want it to be cheaper. And let me tell you, from seeing inside, there's very smart scientists who know what seed oils do to our dopamine, who know what obviously sugar does to our dopamine, the natural flavors do. This food is literally, and this is not hyperbolic, it is weaponized to be addictive. And obviously there's a lot of, lobbying and work to make it cheap. Okay, we get that. Now that's making us all sick. The devil's bargain, what the problem is that 95% of healthcare dollars are spent on interventions after people get sick. Healthcare is now the largest and the fastest growing industry in the United States, which is insane, right? And a lot of your listeners are in tech. Tech innovation means lower prices, better outcomes. Now, literally, let's again, healthcare, the fastest growing industry and the largest industry in the United States. And the faster it grows, the worst outcomes it produces. So you have this totally, why is that? Why? It's very simple. You make money when a child is obese. You make money when a child has fatty liver disease. You make money when heart disease goes up. You lose money when a child learns metabolically healthy habits. So this is the foundational problem. That's what we bonded over. And yeah, Justin and I had never used our HSA or FSA. I think it's this thing that's kind of this hassle. I think there's rightful cynicism about the HSA, FSA, right? All of us, the majority of Americans have access to one. We see it on our open enrollment that we just kind of click through and it's like, you want to do tax-free dollars. It's like, oh, it's use it or lose it. It's scary. I've always declined it. And again, that's part of the tough incentives of the system because it's always like user, well, I don't know if I'm going to get sick. Here's the fact. We're all sick. People in their 20s, 30s, and 40s are harboring metabolic dysfunction. One of the greatest lies in healthcare is that people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s are healthy. Look around us. We've got anxiety. We've got sluggishness. We've got brain fog. We've got people, mass problems with sleep. We've got PCOS just rampant. We've got male infertility and spread. We've actually have visible signs of a lot of problems among all of our friends, and myself included. And even if everything's perfect, we're brewing metabolic dysfunction, right? If you take anyone's biomarkers, right, 93% of people in this country would show some sign of metabolic dysfunction. So it's not even accurate that we're healthy. And it's really part of the problem that these HSA, FSA things are seen as like, okay, get heart disease, get diabetes, then you can pay for your insulin, then you can pay for your statins. No, you can actually use it by the letter and spirit of the law to prevent what's probably brewing in your body right now and keep that down. And we're really excited about this. I mean, it's actually very seamless. On that open enrollment, I did this for the first time, right? It's just one click, put $7,200 maxed out for a family. And now my family, we're really excited. I mean, it's saving thousands of dollars. We're going to be able to buy healthy food for our family, exercise, omega-3 supplements, things that really help our metabolic health. And our implementation on TrueMed, and Justin and I have, when we found that this worked, when we dug deep into the compliance, we're like, how do we make this dead simple, dead seamless? Yeah. And what we're excited to be launching soon is we're going to have a payment integration, just like Affirm, just like PayPal, right in the payment flow for healthy brands. So some of your listeners probably have an HSA, FSA, they've got a card in their pocket. You can take out that card, which usually wouldn't work on like a site like Athletic Greens or Eat Sleep or an exercise equipment. Through our payment flow, you can take a couple questions and get pre-approved right in the flow, take that card out and pay with your HSA, FSA card just right as you're buying one of these products. On our website, TrueMed.com, we're going to, when we launch in the next several months, list these growing list of merchants. You'll be able to go and just select our payment option. Super easy. That's going to be for the $140 billion for the people that have money in their HSA, FSA. But, I'm hoping, and what we hope is like, an open enrollment, everyone can, there's trust now. You can really use that money for things that really keep us healthy. So that's the change we're trying to fight. And the last thing I'll just say on the higher mission standpoint is, to us, this is a model. It's a real value to customers right now where you can save thousands of dollars, but it's a model of where we need to move healthcare policy, right? There are ways that instead of waiting for people to get sick and then drugging them with ineffective solutions, we can actually steer that money to incentivizing healthy behaviors. And if we do that, I think the American people will be healthier. I think everything is driven by incentives, Joe.
Hey, everyone. We'll get you back to the show in just a second. But first, I wanted to tell you about our exclusive PR partner, Jack Taylor. Honestly, this one's a no-brainer. We've known the Jack Taylor team for years. They work with some of the most innovative health and wellness companies. We're talking Whoop, Athletic Greens, Hyperice, and many more. Jack Taylor has an extensive industry network, knows how to work with high-growth companies, and really invests in building long-term relationships. I know this firsthand because they're Fitt Insider's PR agency, so I can confidently recommend them, and I do all the time. From startups to more established brands, they go beyond pushing product to help companies truly thrive. If you want to learn more, head to jacktaylorpr.com and tell them Fitt Insider sent you. Now, back to the show. 100%. I couldn't agree more. I think, as you look at it, especially from the HSA, FSA standpoint and the broader incentives, is like, even if you are making healthy choices, or just think over the last, call it decade, right? The kind of proliferation of health, wellness, fitness products, the question still comes at some point, like, who pays for it? Like, yes, me as a consumer, I'm paying for it, but I'm also paying for my insurance, and I'm also paying for the deductibles and all the other things that come along with that on the side of the reactive sick care. So why isn't it that anybody is incentivizing me to make those healthy decisions at the onset so that I don't rack up all those costs and strain on the system and the kind of lack of productivity, lack of efficiency, all the other things that go into broader societal kind of contributions from that front. And I think we've started to see that in some areas, right? Is it your employer who's going to incentivize you to wear an Apple Watch and maybe make some healthier decisions, and kind of whole bag of worms there. And maybe it works, maybe it
Right.
doesn't. Still, who's paying for it? Same thing with kind of financial institutions. If you want to have a credit card and you run these things up, and can we get reimbursed for them and compensated? How, from like the HSA FSA standpoint, for people who are kind of thinking, hey, I have one of those, like this would be awesome. What qualifies? What can I purchase? Right. And then from the kind of brand perspective, somebody who's listening to this show thinking, oh, my company sells XYZ product. Can I qualify, right, to be included in this kind of incentive for the HSA FSA?
Great questions. We are on a warpath to evangelize brands like Eat Sleep, like Athletic Greens, like fitness companies, food companies. We're on a mission to evangelize. These products are the best medicine. If you can have somebody and enable them to sleep 20% better, put that up against any drug on the market that's better. People say, well, I'm calling out financial incentives. They're like, what are your financial incentives? I'm like, we're in the pocket of big broccoli. Like, we want to prescribe more broccoli. We want to prescribe more pasture raised, grass-fed beef, right? It's like, put that up against anything. So any merchant, right, that is dedicated to metabolic health, we want to talk to, and we want to enable you. And we want to be on the warpath here to explain how your product is better medicine. It's been an honor for Justin and I to be a little bit involved in the public conversation recently and tweeting about this stuff. We've had members of Congress DM us on the agriculture committee who don't even, know what to do. There's really just, I think, a lack of even understanding about how broken the system is. We're going to DC next week and actually meeting with members of Congress. We're talking about how Eat Sleep, about how these supplements, about how great food is medicine. People actually want there to be change. So that's our mission. Our mission is to, by writing these prescriptions, to enable, and really start lowering that cost curve. Because as you said, it's these things are expensive by design. Coke is cheaper than water because it's so subsidized. We're really stacked against this. Is of course it's causing trillions of dollars of downstream health impacts, which isn't priced in. So we're trying to level that playing field. So for the consumer, you're going to come to our site, and this is also for merchants. This is what we're trying to enable. Trust and a high clinical bar is really important to us. So there's a couple important categories. Food, and it's got to be food that doesn't include the unholy trinity of, sugar, seed oils, highly processed grains, in my opinion. I think we're generally going to be going up the fairway of enabling whole foods. And we're talking to some large, grocery folks and people like that to enable whole foods. We'll do that on a case-by-case basis, but food that's metabolic healthy. I do think there's a place, and I, personally do think this is secondary, and I think you can get a lot of this from food, but I think supplementation is important. I think, there's crazy statistics on omega-3s and, getting enough of those, vitamin D, things like that. So we're going to be assessing supplements as well. Anything that can motivate you to get that exercise, to get that, high intensity interval training, to get that resistance training, get that cardio, is going to be a great candidate for us. And then other things that improve metabolic habits. I mentioned Eat Sleep. There's incredible research now on cold plunges, things like that. So if your company is mission driven and falls in that bucket of a mission to improve metabolic health, biosensors is another one, which I think there's a revolution happening in, then we definitely want to talk. And we've got a great group of initial merchants that we're partnering with, led by, Justin's old company, Kettle and Fire, on down, a lot of his connections. And Casey, my sister, is helping a lot with that too. And a lot of just this great community being built, but we'd love to chat. And as a customer, we're on the work. What we hope TruMed is, obviously it's a way to really save and drive real value, but we really want it to be seen as a personal statement to your identity that you're making, where you're using that healthcare dollars, those tax advantage dollars, not to wait to buy drugs in 10 years, but to help yourself right now to live a better life. That's our goal.
Yeah, it's again a super compelling mission, but also an important one in that, if you can build the almost like lead domino around, hey, who are going to be the early adopters from a brand standpoint, and then consumers who then are incentivized from these things, they're just going to keep coming back, which is, hopefully how it plays out, and continuing to not just benefit them, but benefit us kind of collectively.
Yeah. And I think that's certainly how we look at it from the business standpoint. I think it all starts with trust. I mean, it all starts with us having a clinical team of food as medicine providers and really vetting every single product we let on. I think we would be very upset with ourselves and have actually already turned down some massive merchants that don't quite hit the bar. So it's a high bar and a high trust that these are metabolically healthy items. And I think if you have that trust and have that culture, and Justin and I, bonded over devoting the next 20 years of our lives to this. And I do feel like, we're building an incredible, talented, mission-driven team that I would say is just very ethical and very driven on the business will be good if we adhere to the mission. So yes, that's our flywheel we're trying to create from the business standpoint, is that, you can feel comfortable now putting that money into your FSA, HSA account, and then come to us for that we're enabled trusted brands for you to spend that money to save on trusted brands that improve metabolic health. That's our goal and business strategy, and what we're really focused on. I think what our company depends on is just seamlessness. That's our word we talk about a lot, as you said, and I think it's almost by design. Healthcare is so complicated, right? And our hope and what we're seeing is like this takes a little bit of education, right? You've got to contribute to your HSA, FSA, get that card, hopefully. But then it's just right in the payment flow. We're very excited about it and just driving to have this as dead simple as possible for customers.
Yeah, a few things that you touched on there: mission driven, being ethical about who you allow on, building trust with consumers, right? The exact opposite of the system as it's constructed today, right? Not only in terms of making ultra processed, unhealthy foods just the status quo, but who's funding that research, who kind of benefits from a business standpoint when we are all collectively sick. There's a kind of myriad of issues that we can get into some of them or all of them here. But I guess the kind of loaded question is, how did we get here? And then how do we kind of collectively, I feel like there's an awareness and acknowledgement of like, this isn't right. When you, as you say, we look at our friends and even ourselves at times be like, I am not up to the kind of level that I feel like I could be or should be, but more broadly across society, like we're really kneecapping ourselves in every single aspect, and we seemingly just go about our business, right? It's kind of like getting the money and the influence out of big food and big pharma is kind of like saying, let's get the money out of politics, right? It's like, yes, ideally, but like, how do we get here? How do we start to roll some of this back?
Great question. And this has been my passion and a big journey for me to understand this. And I'll give you a couple minute history as I see it in the past 120 years. And I do think, to roll it back, the first step is understanding our current incentives is necessary for empowerment. And I do think we're in a moment here where we're questioning incentives and our institutions more and more for great reason. So let me explain kind of the theory I have and kind of what I see happen over the past 120 years. And it revolves around understanding acute versus chronic symptoms. So when we think of medical miracles, almost anything I think we could think of is a cure for a acute situation, something that would imminently kill you, discovered before 1960. The real propellers of life expectancy have been emergency surgical procedures for a complicated childbirth, which was the number one cause of death, I think for humans just 100 years ago in America. Appendix about to burst, right? You're about to die of a heart problem and, bypass, these things that are emergencies, right? Obviously antibiotics and preventing infections, which is a huge, huge problem. You can argue vaccines, these things that were, acute one-time basically treatments. You take the antibiotic, you're done. You do the surgery, you're out. That's really what propelled medicine and life expectancy forward. And actually, the big change here was the birth control pill in the 1960s. So the birth control pill was the first chronic treatment pharmaceutical product ever. Before the birth control pill in the 1960s, there was no product in American medical history that a patient took for a sustained period of time. And what the birth control showed is that you could actually get folks on a product for recurring revenue for a long period of time. you actually had the Sackler family, Arthur Sackler, who's the grandfather of the folks that did the Purdue Pharma thing, who's the marketing executive, whiz kid, in the 1960s, said we need to create more chronic issues. And that led to a whole host of mental drugs, Valium. So by the late 1960s, 1970s, you had on the cover of Time, Valium Nation, and 30% of women in the United States were on Valium, which is highly addictive. And it just went from there, where there was a huge push, and all focus of medicine went from 100% solving acute issues that, that you're kind of out of the hospital, to creating recurring revenue patients. And today, over 90% of all medical spending is driven by chronic conditions. So what's happened over those 50, 60 years as we've shifted more to medical institutions focusing on chronic? All that's happened is there's been an explosion of those chronic conditions that we've been trying to treat. So as more metformin and diabetes drugs have been prescribed, diabetes has gone up 700%, in the last 2 generations, and we spend $1 trillion on diabetes management. Cancer treatment has been an absolute scandal. We spend $300 billion a year on cancer treatments, and cancer rates are going up. We spend $1 trillion worldwide on statins, heart disease is going up. The number one most prescribed drug in the United States is an SSRI, and depression and suicide is off the charts. It's actually crazy when you step back and look. We've shifted all of medical spending to chronic conditions, which were pretty much going just fine before 1960. People weren't getting epidemic rates of diabetes. There's no animal in the wild that has epidemic rates of metabolic conditions, right? We're born with an innate understanding of what to eat, of what to do, of movement, of being out in the sun. All that's happened is experts have told us how to medicalize and treat chronic conditions, which of course has led to an explosion of healthcare, as I said, being the largest and fastest growing industry in the United States, and everyone's getting sicker. So that's my assessment. Every institution, a pharma company, a hospital, a medical school, insurance companies, every single institution that touches our health makes more money when more people are sick for longer periods of time. And it's a much larger incentive than any one person. I think there are probably some evil people. Most aren't. We all know our doctors and doctors in my family, obviously, and a lot of ours. They're good people. But I think any of them, if they're intellectually honest, will say that they're in a system that is profiting off more and more people being sick and they don't know what to do, which is why I think doctors, it's kind of sick when you think about it, right? The US is a magnet for pretty much the smartest and most dedicated, driven people in the world to come here and be in the medical system. We saddle them with a ton of debt, and then they realize they're in a system where patients are getting sicker. And what do you have? You have the highest burnout rate and the highest suicide rate of any profession in America is doctors. I think it's because they realize it. I think it's because they got in for the right reasons, but realize it's a disaster and they don't know what to do to change it. If you're in a mission where you feel like you're pushing the ball forward and doing good things, you're not committing suicide at epidemic rates. That's what I think is happening to doctors personally.
Yeah, I don't think to your point, there's no easy solution. And I do think we find ourselves at this point where we're kind of looking around and saying, because of a distrust in institutions, because we're spending more on healthcare and we're getting worse results, because when you kind of look around the world and you see whether it's our health or happiness or mental health declining, while other countries who, whether it's a different system, different approach to life, what have you, are not having the same problems. But at the same time, it's probably not, the cabal of doctors sitting around in a room thinking like, hey, how do we sabotage health for the entire country? We've just slowly but surely gone so far down this path that now we're stuck. And whether it's the incentives, whether it's removing kind of the influences of those incentives, or likely all of the above, we're at this inflection point where it just can't continue to go on. The country can't sustain itself, right?
Yeah, no, it's bottoms up and tops down. I think there are, I have a couple bottoms up solutions. I mean, it's figuring out how to take advantage of your healthcare dollars to stay healthy, which TrueMed is trying to do. I've got a blunt one, and I think it's do not respect what the medical system tells you on preventing chronic conditions, which is the majority of what the medical system does. It's just that plain, right? You've got a lot of people that come on and give some medical takes and say, well, consult your doctor. Don't consult your doctor. Why the hell will we be telling people to consult their doctor when we have an epidemic rates of metabolic conditions that they're overseeing? Having a new son, you go into the pediatrician, they're required to give you an American Academy of Pediatrics document telling them to eat processed grains. Humans aren't evolutionarily made to eat processed grains as their first food. That's criminal. But of course, processed grain companies fund the American Academy of Pediatrics. I oversaw Coke donating millions of dollars to the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Diabetes Association. Like, this is rigged. Like, this is causing violence to us. We should absolutely take it into consideration, but you should not be listening to your pediatrician and taking their word for it. They don't deserve that, right? There is violence happening to kids right now. 25% of them have prediabetes. Like, in what world should we be listening to the medical community on chronic conditions? We just need to have that on the baseline. We've also been a little bit lied to. It is simple, right? Food, sleep, movement, stress management. And I'm working on this myself, and I'm on a path too. I'm not a but this is, I think, how we should think about our lives and think about public policy. It's like, I was recently talking to somebody who's like, they said their dog's waking them up, every night. It's like, you should give away the dog. They're like, I can't work out because I need to spend more time with my kid. You should spend less time with your child and work out. This is existential to life. I can't afford healthy food. You should buy a smaller house. It's like, that's what the medical community should be saying urgently. Of course, they should be calling for a policy change because, for instance, where it's now saying that the government should pay for obesity drug for 80% of Americans who are overweight or obese, which will cost over $10,000 per patient per year. It'd be cheaper to buy people food. We can get into the top down, but we just need to kind of understand how serious this is. Like we've been totally lost our way. And until we realize that what we eat, our movement, our stress management, our sleep is absolutely existential. Like, if we don't realize this as a society, we are going to cease to exist as a society. And that's not being hyperbolic, right? We talk about healthcare costs so much, our eyes gloss over, but 20% of GDP growing at an increasing rate, double the rate of GDP with nothing slowing it down, is 40% of GDP in 15 years. It's like this is going to bankrupt the country. We spend more caring for lower income folks on Medicaid with diabetes 6 times more than we do on defense. And that's growing at an increasing rate. So it's like this is going to bring down the country, not to mention that we're going to have a totally non-competitive society where today less than 20% of 21-year-olds can even join the military. We're trying to lower those standards. We're going to be like Wall-E, where everyone's going around in an assisted device. That's not too hyperbolic, right? So, and the only way we do that is realize it's basic metabolic habits. And just real quickly, from the top down, people are like, this is so complicated. This isn't complicated, right? Americans listen to medical leaders. There's been a complete moral lapse among medical leaders, right? When medical leaders said, very late, by the way, in the 1980s, that smoking was bad, smoking rates plummeted. When medical leaders told us several years ago that we all needed the vaccine, 80%, 85% of people got, it's like, people do listen, right? And right now, the USDA is saying that a 2-year-old, 10% of their diet, is added sugars. That's okay. A highly addictive drug, which is just crazy. Like, they could say tomorrow that the sugar should be 0. I'm not saying we should ban sugar. I enjoy a beer once or twice, occasionally, right? And I don't think the USDA should be saying that there's a recommended level of alcohol. I don't think they should be saying there's a recommended level of marijuana. I don't think they should be saying there's a recommended level of tobacco. The only difference between sugar and those items is sugar is exponentially worse. So there can be leadership where the standards are changed, which dramatically change society. So anyway, until there's some more leadership from the medical community, we've got to ask how we can incentivize. Again, that brings us back to TruMed, which I think is a big part of the puzzle. If you can save families a couple $1,000 a year on exercise and food, I think that leads to some good things. They're going to be eating more healthy food and exercising.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point around, you're obviously kind of standing up and saying it, both social media, on podcasts, wherever you can at this point. I know you're working on a book and saying, like, this is broken. And I think there's also been this, I don't want to call it fear, but maybe hesitation for people to say that, because they don't want to get captured in, you're fat shaming, you're criticizing, low income families because they can't afford healthy food. They live in a food desert. They don't have access. Kids, they're eating the school lunch and that's all their family can afford, these types of things. But to your point, there was a point in time where we had to stand up and confront big tobacco and say, hey, this is killing us, it's causing cancer. Still, people smoke today, but the rates have decreased. And we've actually written about and talked about, there was a point in time also where JFK gave a presidential address and said, we're becoming a society of spectators. Our kids aren't outside playing. We don't play sports. We're getting overweight. We're unhealthy. This is going to compromise everything, not just in the workforce and productivity and what we mean to each other and communities and families, but from a defense standpoint, like we're putting the country at a compromised position. And I think maybe since then, nobody has stood up and said, we're unhealthy, we're overweight, we're not physically active, the food system is rigged, we all the incentives are wrong. And yeah, I mean, you can be in the pocket of whoever's paying basically to bankroll the candidacy or your business or what have you, but at some point somebody's got to stand up and say that. And I've thought down this path, and excited to see you all doing that to some extent, but the recent kind of rise of digital health, and the investment that's flown into that space, to some extent augmenting and increasing convenience of a broken system. Why aren't we, or what is it going to take for, again, from a bottom up perspective, the kind of collective leadership of these digital health companies to get together and say, like, we're not going to be part of this system any longer?
I think I want everyone to take away, I've gone through stages, kind of starting to understand these issues a year or two ago, kind of despondent. I am hyper optimistic. Like a lot of good stuff in America has happened to health in the past 120 years. Life expectancy has doubled, again, mostly through acute cures, not chronic. But we've lost our way. But this is what's great about America. Like you're a warrior. There's thousands of warriors. We're trying to be in that fight. We're talking on podcasts. The most listened to podcast is a guy that, loves psychedelics and talking about systems of, how the world works and talking about looking at the sun and eating healthy and exercising and how to be a good person. And everyone's trying to shut him down from the elite. It's crazy, but it's just like, that makes me very optimistic, actually. I think you bring up a good point on the biowearable revolution. And I think there's a lot of, discussion on your podcast and your channels on this. And my take on that is, the industry will sort itself up. There'll be winners, losers. Maybe there's some overinflated things happening. But this is a massive, one of the most important trends in America. And what I think is going to happen is the doctor's office is going to be completely disrupted. What a fallacy. What a fallacy to say that the point of healthcare is to get more access to the doctor's office. The doctor's office is not where health happens. Health happens by daily habits, by the hundreds of micro decisions we make. And today, still in U.S. states, and a number of them, patients aren't legally even allowed to have their medical information. That's owned by the hospitals, right? We have such little information. And what I see happening with biowearables is it's just that real-time MRI on what's happening with our body, tied to actionable recommendations, tied to bringing chronic disease issues, which seem so far in the future, to now saying that if you don't start eating the following and moving every day, you're going to have an 80% chance of getting heart disease in 5 years. We're going to start having that, right? We're going to start having, the app tell us the metabolic things that we need to do to thrive, which might up to including drugs in rare cases, I think. But like, that's where I think we're going, which I'm very optimistic about. And again, TruMed also is absolutely like, I'll, put a levels or put a Whoop or put a H-Sleep, as I mentioned, or a lot of these wearables, ketone measurements to make sure you kind of understand what's going on. Like put that against any drug, right? That's the fight we want to have. That's the discussion we want to have. There is room for optimism. I think there's a lot of people chipping away. And I think that's what's leading a bottoms-up revolution where people are waking up. I think what I'm also working on, and kind of as this movement's been happening, as I've been chatting with a lot of, people, again, very privileged to be in this kind of fight, is there's got to be more top-down organization. What I saw the American Beverage Association do, right, is they get Dr. Pepper, Pepsi, Coke, they get everyone under one roof, and then they just pick things apart very systematically. The problem on a top-down is that I actually think you have a lot of voter frustration and anger, but it hasn't been channeled, right? So something I'm thinking about, as I'm chatting with people, is how do we channel that like grassroots? Because I can tell you, there's millions of moms out there who are absolutely irate, and it's their number one issue about what's happened to the health of kids. There's a lot of people that really care about this, but it's the intensity. It's the fact that the soda companies can get those billions of dollars in one place and execute it in a systematic way. So I'm optimistic on that front too. But yeah, I agree. This is a bottoms up revolution. where I think people are understanding what's going on. They're taking matters into their own hands with the biowearables, with the podcasts, with reading, look at the bestseller, look, it's books on bestseller list, it's books on metabolic health. And then I think eventually we'll get more organization on channeling their frustration to policy change, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to maintain that optimism. I kind of always come full circle back there
Yeah.
because I think even myself, I'm like, am I getting caught up in this new product, this quick fix, this technology, and it's just like do the basics and continue to move in that direction, consistency, right? All those things. But at the end of the day, it's also more awareness, more knowledge, more personalization, all of those things through technology for more people that, again, puts me on the side of optimism.
We've got it. I mean, it's existential. Like this problem is, as I said, I really do think if we don't turn this around, I think it's the biggest risk to the future of America. I mean, we're going to go bankrupt and have a non-competitive society. But I think we've got to be optimistic. And it's a cliche, but it does start with us. It starts at home. It starts taking matters in your own hand. And I don't know. I don't know about you. I'm very heartened being on this journey and being inspired by Casey and a lot of folks like you, and just kind of entering the. It's just there are a lot of people chipping away. It is inspiring to see.
Yeah, well, kind of continuing that fight and staying on that mission as we kind of get towards the end of the conversation here.
Mhm.
What should we look out for, or where should folks kind of tune into to follow along with you and what True Medicine is doing?
Awesome. Yeah, so TrueMed.com is our website right now. That's a landing page, but you can sign up for, if you're a consumer, to know about our launch when you're going to be able to buy again some of your favorite healthy brands with your HSA FSA dollars tax free, saving 30, 40, whatever your income tax bracket is. So we're really excited about that. My Twitter, Calley Means, my co-founder Justin JW Mayers, we're talking a lot about this and larger issues. Just a couple specific asks. If you're a merchant, if you're selling one of these items I've talked about and are on a mission to improve metabolic health through fitness, through food, through other metabolic habits, sleep, cold plunge, etc., shoot us a message. Or as I said on Twitter, Calley Means, there's a form on our website. Hopefully, there's different ways to get to us, but we'd love to chat, and that's our mission. And I also think, as I mentioned, we're building a mission-driven team. I mean, to me, Justin and I had a very selfish motivation, which is to devote our lives to this with amazing people who want to nudge the world forward to incentivizing healthy behaviors more as part of healthcare policy. And we've really been able to connect with great people on that front and want to build a really small team where we always say we want an adult team. We just want people to really be hyper aligned on this mission and the kind of general outlines of the product we're trying to build, but then really go and execute. And that's how the culture's been so far. And specific hires we're looking at right now are engineering. We've got a great engineering team being built, and we're looking for one additional senior engineer. We're looking for somebody to really help with those merchant relationships and just be tied at the hip with Justin, just hand-to-hand combat, making sure our merchants are really successful with this integration and then scaling processes to onboard other merchants. We're starting with Shopify and integration, but branching out to other platforms and kind of thinking about how to do that and thinking about how to make merchants successful. And then growth marketing as well, like a lot of startups. But we've really been enjoying talking about the mission on a lot of these media, podcasts and things like that. And really want to continue espousing the mission, and also really, to me, our growth strategy and our marketing strategy on the TrueMed level is just evangelizing our merchants. I mean, we've got a pretty cool thing where we're just, having more and more brands we admire, enabling savings on those brands. And then we really want to make the case that those brands are medicine. This is serious. We're writing medical prescriptions. I'm just hoping somebody from Pharma or somebody's like, "Oh, you're overprescribing broccoli." It's like we would love to compare what we're prescribing versus what's usually prescribed. So that's a little bit of our growth marketing strategy. So that resonates with anyone. And just you're in ninja. I don't like that word ninja, but if you're great at the the SEO and the social and just kind of all these growth tactics, we'd love to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that'll resonate with a lot of folks, and we'll make sure to get all the
Great.
links and everything in the show notes here and encourage people to reach out. But Yeah, it was great chatting here today. We'll definitely be keeping tabs on everything you're working on. So
Thanks,
thanks for
Joe.
making time.
Thanks, man.
One more thing before you head out. Help us spread the word. Take a minute to rate and review the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or share this episode with a friend. And if you like conversations like this, you'll love the Fitt Insider newsletter. We send it every Tuesday. The link is in the description. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week.